What does it take to build a $10 billion company? Knowledge, skill, experience, vision. Typically, these are the cornerstones of any successful enterprise. Yet, Elizabeth Holmes, once hailed as the next Steve Jobs, built Theranos, a billion-dollar company, not on these principles, but on lies, blind loyalty, and manipulation. First, they think you're crazy, then they fight you, and then all of a sudden, you change the world. This was the mantra Elizabeth Holmes lived by. Armed with only her unwavering confidence, she dropped out of university at 19 and started this company, dreaming of revolutionizing the healthcare industry. But reality proved far different from her vision. So what actually happened? What were the lies told? Ultimately, what is the real story? Welcome to MoneyDoc a channel dedicated to entrepreneurs who risked it all to create today's most iconic brands. Let's get started. Theranos, the most evil business in the world. Chapter 1. The Rise. At the age of 19, Elizabeth Holmes dropped out of Stanford University to start a company originally called Real-Time Cures, which she later renamed Theranos, a combination of therapy and diagnosis, to avoid suspicion. Holmes, who had a deep fear of needles, envisioned a device that could conduct hundreds of tests from a single drop of blood, making blood testing faster, cheaper, and more accessible. With her well-connected family and persuasive charm, she managed to secure initial funding from investors who lacked medical expertise. Despite warnings from experts that her idea was likely impossible, Holmes pressed on, hiring a team of scientists to develop her revolutionary device. By 2006, Theranos had a prototype called the Edison, a machine that claimed to perform blood tests using a drop of blood placed on a cartridge, which would then be wirelessly transmitted for analysis. However, Edison was plagued with errors and inaccuracies. Despite this, the company's initial funds were dwindling, and Holmes needed more money. She began staging elaborate demonstrations to mislead investors about the machine's capabilities. When investors visited to see the Edison in action, their blood samples were secretly tested by scientists using traditional methods, not the Edison. Holmes's deception extended to her company's financial projections. When the chief financial officer discovered the fake demonstrations and inflated revenue predictions, he confronted Holmes and was promptly fired. Holmes never replaced him, allowing her to continue fabricating financial data without oversight. Despite the internal chaos, Theranos secured more funding, and Holmes gained further fame and investment by wooing high-profile backers. Theranos' work culture became notorious for its secrecy and paranoia. Employees signed non-disclosure agreements and were constantly monitored. Holmes and her partner, Sunny Balwani, who also held a top position at the company, fostered an oppressive environment where dissent was punished by dismissal. Balwani, who lacked medical knowledge, ruled through intimidation, surveilling employees and creating a toxic workplace. Chapter 2. Fake Breakthrough. In 2013, Theranos struck deals with big stores like Walgreens and Safeway. After the deal was announced, Elizabeth Holmes started appearing all over the news. Forbes, CNBC, CNN, Fox Business, and pretty much everyone wanted to cover her story. She became a celebrity, which she thoroughly enjoyed. The media lapped up the narrative of a young woman thriving in the male-dominated tech industry and becoming the first female tech billionaire. Comparisons were drawn to other young college dropouts like Mark Zuckerberg. However, what they failed to acknowledge was that coding is something one can learn independently, but jumping out of a chemical engineering degree after just a few months doesn't qualify you to start a revolutionary medical company. But the media and investors were so desperate to believe in this incredible story of a young college dropout saving lives that they initially didn't look as closely as they should have. This kind of fake stories and flexes became a boon to Theranos, allowing the company to gain more credibility and investment. Yes, despite the Edison machine's unreliability, Theranos proceeded with partnerships, setting up labs to process blood samples with traditional methods. This violated regulations, compromising accuracy and risking lives. Patients received alarming diagnoses, yet Theranos continued, driven by Holmes's charisma and the allure of innovation. Investors and the public overlooked scrutiny, Amid internal chaos, external success soared, with Forbes naming Holmes the world's youngest self-made female billionaire in 2014 and Theranos valued at $9 billion. Chapter 3: Elizabeth's Clever Games. At this point, you may wonder how she succeeded while her main idea was a failure. Just think, the core concept she promoted was fundamentally flawed. So, how did she manage to secure so many deals for a product that wasn't even working properly? They covered up the machine's shortcomings by using traditional methods. The supposed innovation existed only on paper. How did this go unnoticed? Because Elizabeth's real talent wasn't in medicine or business. Her real gift was manipulating others. For example, she did a TED Talk where she spoke passionately about losing her uncle to cancer and how heartbroken she had been, claiming she wanted to build Theranos so people wouldn't lose loved ones too soon. However, it was later found she hadn't even been close to her uncle, but really, they had been duped by Elizabeth and bought into her lies because they wanted it to be true. Some investors did at least seek some proof the technology worked, but Elizabeth was prepared for that. She put the Pfizer logo on several Theranos documents and presentations, implying Pfizer had in some way approved the technology, which of course they hadn't. She also had a report from Johns Hopkins Medical School, which she claimed endorsed Theranos' technology. But in reality, it was simply a two-page report confirming the medical school had seen the device. The report said nothing about them actually verifying the results themselves. To an untrained eye, the documents Elizabeth produced seemed genuine. Chapter 4: Elizabeth Holmes' Mimicry. In addition to all these making-ups, Elizabeth idolized Steve Jobs, who had dropped out of college to start his business. Just like her, she began to see herself as the next Steve Jobs. She was obsessed with him, dressing in his signature black turtleneck and even hiring former Apple employees who had worked with him. She wanted to schedule meetings on Wednesdays because that's the same day Steve Jobs met with his team. She even claimed Theranos' blood testing system would be the iPod of healthcare. Unfortunately, she fixated on arbitrary style requirements, like making the device smaller and smaller, which made the scientists' jobs even more difficult than they already were, and doing interviews claiming she'd invented a revolutionary new device. Elizabeth even put on a fake voice when she was doing business. Employees noticed that when she got excited or drunk, her unusually deep voice suddenly changed to a much higher pitch. There are even clips where you can hear her briefly fall out of character. When Joe Biden visited Theranos, they created a fake lab to show him, which they claimed was fully automated, but it didn't work at all. It was all for show. Biden had no idea and described it as the laboratory of the future, calling Elizabeth inspiring, thus giving her even more perceived credibility, and added to the board of fellows at Harvard Medical School. Despite behaving like a villain, she was portrayed as a hero and continued to believe her own hype. Despite this success, Elizabeth never stopped her manipulative tactics. She continued her relentless self-promotion through endless interviews and speeches, appearing on the cover of countless magazines. She even redesigned her office to look like the president's Oval Office, complete with bulletproof glass. While seeing all these events unfold, it seems Elizabeth genuinely believed that, in the end, everything would work out. In her mind, all the lies she told wouldn't matter, because eventually, the Theranos machine would do everything she said it could. One clear example of this is that literally the night before the Theranos website went live, Elizabeth suddenly requested a huge list of changes. They had to remove loads of information from the site, such as the claim that Theranos was FDA approved or that the machine could do 100 tests and countless other bold claims she had initially made that weren't true. The reason is simple. Up until the night the website was due to go live, Elizabeth genuinely thought all those wild claims she'd made would have come true, but they hadn't. It was the same with the Walgreens and Safeway deals. She kept stalling for time because she felt certain that eventually the technology would catch up to the claims she had made, but they never did. It was the epitome of fake it till you make it. Some have suggested that even to this day, Elizabeth doesn't think she did anything wrong. She just thinks she didn't have enough time. Strangely, this approach seemed to work for a while, as many trusted her, but not everyone was fooled for long. Chapter 5: Silent Doubts and Compelled Loyalty. As part of their agreement with Walgreens, Theranos assigned Kevin Hunter to scrutinize their operations. Kevin, a meticulous investigator, immediately found Elizabeth Holmes evasive and full of excuses whenever he probed deeper. His suspicions heightened when he directly asked about comparing Theranos' blood test data with established commercial labs. Elizabeth's defensive response only fueled his doubts. Despite Kevin's growing skepticism, top executives at Walgreens were captivated by Elizabeth's charisma and her compelling narrative. They were swayed by the company's illustrious investors, convinced that Theranos was on the brink of revolutionizing healthcare. The allure of being part of this pioneering venture, coupled with a fear of missing out on a potentially lucrative opportunity, blinded them to any underlying concerns. They didn't want to miss out on such a potentially lucrative deal, especially because Elizabeth hinted that she'd work with one of their competitors instead if they pulled out. Kevin and a handful of observant colleagues felt uneasy about what lay beneath Theranos' polished exterior. Despite their suspicions, no one had concrete evidence of any wrongdoing because the company operated under a shroud of secrecy. Those who did have proof, former employees bound by strict non-disclosure agreements, faced severe legal repercussions if they spoke out negatively about the company. Many were eager to voice their concerns, but the threat of legal action silenced them. Even as early as 2012, an employee anonymously posted on Reddit about a biotech firm characterized by deceit and intimidation, without naming Theranos directly. They highlighted how the CEO fostered a culture of dishonesty, training staff to conform to false narratives. Most employees, lacking experience, struggled to distinguish normal behavior from manipulation. Elizabeth Holmes dismissed dissenters as disloyal or lacking vision whenever they questioned her directives or deemed her goals unachievable. This environment discouraged criticism and perpetuated the company's facade of success. That's also why Elizabeth hired her brother and his friends, promoting them to positions higher than more qualified candidates, valuing loyalty over competence. However, not every castle built on loyalty can withstand the storm of truth, right? Chapter 6. Beginning of the End. Then one day, everything changed. A Wall Street Journal reporter named John Carreyrou received an anonymous tip alleging that Theranos had been deceiving the public on a massive scale. This tip prompted John to launch an investigation into Theranos, marking the beginning of the end for Elizabeth Holmes. Despite the reluctance of ex-Theranos employees, who feared repercussions for breaking their non-disclosure agreements, many decided it was crucial to speak out. They provided John with first-hand accounts of Theranos' fraudulent practices. Additionally, doctors who had used Theranos' services confirmed receiving abnormal and unreliable test results. As John pieced together these accounts, he began to unravel the full extent of Elizabeth's deception and the widespread fabrications within Theranos. This discovery was pivotal, exposing a complex web of lies that ultimately led to the company's downfall. Elizabeth, realizing the gravity of the situation, swiftly took action. She reached out to Rupert Murdoch, the owner of the Wall Street Journal, pleading with him to halt the impending story. Despite Murdoch's substantial investment of $125 million in Theranos, he refused to intervene, a remarkable decision given his financial stake. With her attempt to suppress the story thwarted, Elizabeth shifted gears and directed Theranos to launch a relentless smear campaign against John Carreyrou. The company sought to undermine his credibility and filed lawsuits against employees suspected of aiding him. Undeterred by these tactics, John remained steadfast and resolute. Despite facing fierce opposition and a barrage of attacks aimed at discrediting him, John Carreyrou refused to yield. His unwavering determination and commitment to uncovering the truth prevailed, culminating in the eventual publication of the story. Within days, other media outlets launched their own investigations into Theranos that Elizabeth Holmes had fabricated every claim about her company. She initially dismissed the accusations as coming from disgruntled ex-employees and untrustworthy competitors. The regulators' findings were unequivocal and damning. They exposed Theranos as a significant threat to patient safety. The Edison machines, touted as revolutionary, were found to be highly unreliable, producing inconsistent results. Quality control failures occurred in 1/3 of cases, and the reported results deviated by as much as 146%. For instance, their syphilis test accuracy stood at a mere 65%, meaning 35 out of every 100 patients received incorrect diagnoses. Furthermore, employees were instructed to disregard abnormal results. compounding the fraudulent practices within the company. In 2018, Theranos was dissolved, and Elizabeth was indicted for defrauding investors. Her actions outside the courtroom contradicted this image as she relished her time with a new boyfriend. While pointing fingers at Sunny Balwani, she adamantly denied any wrongdoing, maintaining a facade of innocence. But apart from all these claims, in 2022, a jury found Elizabeth Holmes guilty of investor fraud, leading to an 11-year prison sentence. However, a recent twist emerged on June 11, 2024, in the San Francisco federal court, as judges heard her appeal against convictions for defrauding investors in Theranos. Elizabeth Holmes's lawyer raised concerns about the testimonies of former employees and argued that more scrutiny should be applied to the prosecution's evidence. Holmes's defense characterized the trial, which ended with a split verdict, as closely contested, implying that the evidence against her was not as conclusive as the prosecution claimed. Meanwhile, Sunny Balwani's lawyer argued that the evidence presented in his case went beyond what was initially outlined in the 2018 indictment against him. Notably, neither Holmes nor Balwani attended the session where these arguments were presented. The judges overseeing the appeal did not specify when they would deliver a decision, underscoring the significance of the uncontested evidence presented during the legal proceedings. Stay tuned as the fate of Theranos hangs in the balance, awaiting the next chapter in its uncertain future. We really hope you enjoyed today's video. Theranos, the most evil business in the world. Be sure to leave a like and comment below on what you loved about our video. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon to never miss another great video. Until next time, we look forward to seeing you in our next video. Remember, no dream is too big.